Did you know that some of the greatest discoveries in history were discovered completely by accident? There's penicillin, the microwave, potato chips, chocolate cookies, black tea. To tell the story of Lapsang Souchong is to tell the history of black tea itself, as Lapsang Souchong was the first black tea ever made, the process of which, like the great discoveries just mentioned, was apparently discovered completely by accident. So sometime during the Qing dynasty in the Wuyi Mountains of northern Fujian, China, the villagers of Tongwu village began to make their green tea for the season. So pretty much all tea producers were making green tea at the time. Now one day, a regiment of Qing soldiers was marching towards the village and they decided to camp out there for a few nights. So the villagers, seeing the soldiers approach, were obviously quite scared and decided to flee the village and hide in the mountains. But before they did that, they decided to cover up all of their tea leaves, which they had just recently picked and had out withering because they were making the green tea for their season. And so they covered up the tea leaves and then they fled to the mountains. And so the soldiers came, made camp for a few nights and used the covered tea leaves as their bedding. And so they were rolling around over them, crushing them, kind of destroying them. And then after a few nights, they left the village. The villagers came back to find that the entire crop of tea leaves was completely ruined. It had completely oxidized, turning this dark brown reddish color. And it also absorbed a lot of kind of bad smells from the soldiers sleeping on them. And so as green tea, the leaves were completely ruined. But the villagers didn't want to just throw away their entire crop for the year because this was their livelihood. They depended on this to live. And so one of the villagers came up with this idea to dry the leaves over pine wood smoke in an attempt to basically mask a lot of those bad smells that the leaves had absorbed from the soldiers. And so they did this, and thus the first black tea ever, Lapsang Souchong, was born. The villagers knew that they couldn't sell this tea locally because everyone was expecting green tea. And so through a merchant, they managed to get this entire crop of tea down to the ports in southern Fujian, where Dutch traders discovered it and brought this tea back to the West. And the following year, that same merchant went back to the village to basically request for more of this new style of tea. And the rest, as they say, is history. So as well known as Lapsang Souchong is in the West, if you go to China and ask for a Lapsang Souchong tea, chances are most people probably wouldn't know what you were talking about. And that's because this tea is more commonly known as Zhenshan Xiaozhong. The name Lapsang Souchong is actually derived from the local Fujianese dialect for this tea, Lapsang Souchong. Lapsang meaning pine wood and Souchong meaning small varietal. So when converted to Mandarin, Lapsang Souchong becomes Zhenshan Xiaozhong. And it's not just the pronunciation that changes, the meaning also changes as well. Now, Xiaozhong still means small varietal, but Zhenshan means true mountain. And to make things even more confusing, the typical Zhenshan Xiaozhong that is served in China, or that you would get in China, is an unsmoked black tea. And so this has led a lot of tea lovers to assume that Zhenshan Xiaozhong or Lapsang Souchong, the traditional form, is actually an unsmoked style of black tea. But this isn't the case at all. The unsmoked variety of Zhenshan Xiaozhong or Lapsang Souchong only really came about relatively recently, around about the 2005 mark, and it coincides with the creation of Jinjunmi black tea, the original form of which is a highly prized and super expensive black tea, also originating from Tongwu village. And so to differentiate between these two styles of Lapsang Souchong, in Mandarin, the Smokey Lapsang Souchong would be referred to as Zhenshan, Xiaozhong. And so smoked and unsmoked Lapsang Souchong, we're talking about two different teas here. How different? Well, so what I've been drinking is a unsmoked Zhenshan Xiaozhong, which we've called Bamboo Forest. And it's a lighter style of black tea. It has a light kind of maltiness. It's definitely sweet, kind of like got a sugarcane sweetness as well. But it has a very distinct kind of citrus-like note, which is something that I've noticed with a lot of teas from the from Tongmu village. I find it very characteristic of a Zhenshan, like something that's very characteristic of a Zhenshan Xiaozhong or even a Jinjunmei as well, is that kind of that light, refreshing kind of citrus note. There's a slight chocolatey note in the aroma and also in the flavor as well, and I find it's that combination of this kind of chocolatey cacao note mixed with that citrus note. That's what is characteristic of a Zhenshan Xiaozhong. Overall, it's fairly light and it's quite refreshing. Now let's compare this to the Smokey Lapsang Souchong. So this Smokey Lapsang Souchong that I'm drinking here, and it's also one that we sell, was actually produced in 2013. So it's been aged a fair few years, which means the smokiness, whilst it's still fairly distinct in terms of its aroma and its flavor, it's definitely the first thing that you notice, has dissipated and more of the flavor of the underlying tea is coming through. So the two, the smokiness plus that underlying tea flavor, actually combine fairly well to create this fairly interesting kind of taste experience with this tea. Definitely what I'm getting at the beginning is that smokiness that definitely hits you first. That's quickly followed by this kind of dried fruit like sweetness, similar to like a dried longan kind of flavor. Then quickly followed by this kind of zingy sourness that hits you at the back of the tongue. And you get that dried fruit characteristic plus that sourness, and then that's quickly followed by, then you get this malty aftertaste at the end. So that malty aftertaste being fairly characteristic of many Chinese black teas. So as you continue to brew this tea, the smokiness starts to dissipate and the inherent tea flavor starts to come out a little bit more. So that sort of dried fruit sweetness followed by that maltiness starts coming to the forefront as the smokiness kind of moves more to the background. So we've tried a few other, sort of more commonly available Lapsang Souchongs out there, and I mean, definitely not my cup of tea. I mean, for some of them out there, like it would taste like what I would imagine, and not that I've ever tried this, but it would taste like what I would imagine if you had an ashtray and you just poured water in it and drank that water. That's what that tea kind of tasted like. It just tasted burnt, tasted like ash. Couldn't taste any underlying tea. Lapsang Souchong typically wasn't something that I would find pleasant to drink. This tea, however, despite that sort of distinct presence of smoke, it's a much more balanced tea. It's kind of opened my eyes to what a smoky Lapsang Souchong can be and should be. So the two teas that I've described in this video are two specific teas that come from the same producer. I don't want to go so far as to generalize and say that what I've described here is 100% representative of all Zhenshan Xiaozhong or Lapsang Souchong black teas out there, whether it's smoked or unsmoked. Like, these are two specific teas that I've described that would give you a general idea or a feel for what the differences are between a smoked and unsmoked Lapsang Souchong tea. So that's the end of our video today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Are you a Smokey Lapsang Souchong fan? Or do you prefer the unsmoked Zhenshan Xiaozhong as your daily drinker? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!